Six Flags Great Adventure is one of the largest amusement parks in the world, boasting a lineup of 14 different coasters, including one of the best in the world with El Toro. However, this is one of the only redeeming qualities about this park right now. In this video, we will take you through Six Flags Great Adventure and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll start off with the good, and that is obviously the coaster lineup, especially El Toro. This coaster is so good that I'm going to give it its own section. In fact, El Toro is so good that it makes a trip to this park worth it all by itself. This is an Intamin prefabricated wooden coaster, one of only 4 in the world, and the only in North America. It stands 181 feet tall with a drop of 176 feet and a top speed of 70 miles per hour, making it second among all wooden coasters in those categories. And this first drop is one of the best in the world. The trains are so long and there's a pre-drop so you can build up some speed before plummeting down the drop. The closest thing I can compare this to is Sky Rush, but I find it even better, especially in the back row, because of the restraints. If you get lucky, you will have so much room in between your legs in the lap bar. The first 2 camelbacks are some of the wildest airtime I've ever experienced. You get absolutely thrown into the lap bar. This is one of about 3 or 4 coasters I've ever ridden where I actually felt like I was going to be ejected from the ride. And the airtime feels kind of unique to me because it actually feels like it is throwing you out of your seat first before dragging you back down again with the lap bar. It legitimately feels like you're riding a bull trying to throw you off. Then there's some filler track, but it sets up for the best element of the ride, the Rolling Thunder Hill. I have no words to describe what this element feels like, except that it's like an even stronger and sharper version of the earlier airtime hills. The airtime is so ridiculously strong that it hurts to experience it. Then, to end the layout, there are some quick transitions that are pretty underrated. I actually love this part of the ride and I think it adds a lot. Then you pop up into the brakes, ending this insane ride. It also never really gets a line, especially on weekdays, so you can marathon it basically the whole day if you want to. When I visited, I got 15 rides and stayed on the train 4 times in a row because there was nobody in line. It is also very smooth for a wooden coaster, especially one of this size. In a non-wheel seat, it barely even feels like a wooden coaster, but there's just enough of a rattle to still give it that authentic wooden coaster feeling. This is one of the best roller coasters in the world, and in my opinion, there's no debate it is part of that club. The rest of this lineup is solid too. Nitro is a solid B&M hyper with a unique layout. It delivers some excellent floater airtime and also has an insanely intense helix before the mid-course. That is a gray out moment for me every single time. King Dakar is the world's tallest coaster, and although it was closed when I visited, it still looks like a fantastic experience. The launch is one of the world's best, and that top hat is crazy as well. It is short, but some of the best 20 seconds you can find on any coaster. Then there is Jersey Devil, which is the most overrated coaster I've ever ridden. The airtime isn't really that great, the inversions aren't special, and the pacing is subpar for an RMC. I had heard that it was running much faster than previously, but it did not feel like it, and it was also 95 degrees when I visited, so temperature was not a factor. There is also a pretty obvious bump every time the track changes pieces. It feels like a weaker version of Outlaw Run's pothole, but it is every 5 seconds. I had a nasty headache as a result. I thought about putting this in the bad category, but it is still a decent ride, I would say, just not close to what I was expecting. The park also has a Batman the Ride clone, and it is the most wild I've experienced. It feels like it is trying to kill you. I was basically graying out the whole ride, and the inversions threw me around like a rag doll. I don't know what it is about this specific clone, but it was insane. Maybe it was because the trains warm up more when they sit inside the steaming hot station, which I will discuss later. The park also has 3 other B&M loopers, and 2 of them belong in this category, Medusa and Superman Ultimate Flight. Medusa is a decent floorless coaster with some fun inversions, and Superman is the basic flying coaster clone that we see at Six Flags parks. The park's operations are the first thing that belong in the bad category, and honestly, I wouldn't even say they were necessarily bad, but they were just meh at best. A lot of coasters were running one train even though the park was busy. Nitro, Jersey Devil, and Medusa were all on one train. Medusa wasn't a big deal because that coaster never really gets a long line, but Jersey Devil always has one of the longest lines because of its poor capacity and small trains. this coaster should almost never be running one train, especially on a busy day. The same applies to Nitro. Even though this coaster has a lot higher capacity with its 4-cross seating, it still gets a long line. Nitro is probably the most popular coaster in the park, so it should rarely be running one train. However, once they did put 2 trains on, the dispatches on Nitro were crazy fast. More than once, they were ready to dispatch, but they had to wait because the train ahead had not cleared the block zone that they needed it to. I will give them some credit there. El Toro's operations were alright, but definitely not something to rave about. Superman Ultimate Flight was probably one of the better crews. Even though this ride model is notorious for its horrible dispatches, these weren't that bad. Overall, the operations weren't great, but weren't too bad either. The most frustrating part is the one-train operations on some of their most popular coasters. The other thing I'm going to put in the bad category is the line jumping issue this park has. I think I saw more line jumping in one day at this park than I have in all my other visits to Six Flags parks combined. It is just rampant, and park staff do not care. I realize that overall, line jumping doesn't really make too big of an impact on wait times, but it just feels demoralizing to see group after group of people hop the railing and pass by the line. I saw multiple different groups of people reporting the line jumping both digitally and directly to park staff, with other witnesses to back them up, and absolutely nothing was done about it. It's frustrating, but overall not the biggest issue, which I will discuss now. This is where this park does some things absolutely horribly, making for some of the most annoying moments I've ever had at a park. First, management does not seem to care about the employees or the park in general. There were multiple employees that talked about how management just ignores them. In the Batman station, there is no air conditioning, but they don't even have the fans in there running to cool the ride ops, so they are just constantly working in the heat with no reprieve at all. The day we visited, the conditions inside that station were just abysmal. And I say that as someone who is not sensitive to heat. In the Jersey Devil queue, someone broke the PA speakers and they won't replace them. This is extremely annoying when the ride breaks down and you don't know what is going on with the coaster. The ride ops of that coaster told us that they had requested management to get them some new speakers, but to no avail. These kinds of things all add up and show that the park doesn't care about the operators or the guests. And there were a few other ride operators I talked to as well who just said that they don't like the management at this park and that none of the employees really feel appreciated at all. This is even more annoying when coasters are always broken down. That is my second point. The maintenance is absolutely awful here. Kingda Ka and Green Lantern were closed the entire day. Nitro, Jersey Devil, Medusa, Joker, and Superman Ultimate Flight all opened late. Nitro and Jersey Devil also went down multiple times during the day, as did El Toro. It was kind of a nightmare. You go to one ride and it's closed, so you go to another one, but then that's closed too. This just makes your day disappointing, especially when one of the major attractions is already closed for the entire day. I've never seen maintenance and operations at a park this bad, not even from a lower tier park like Six Flags St. Louis. This is just more evidence that upper management cannot care less about guest satisfaction. This is stuff that should be better for any park, but especially from a flagship Six Flags park. If they could just improve these things, people would have a much better visit to the park and might also be more likely to spend money at the park on merchandise. People would also be much more likely to return to the park again. And one more thing that belongs in the ugly category is the locker policies. These are just straight up terrible. Some coasters you need to buy a locker outside of the queue, some have free double-sided lockers, and some you don't need one at all. There's no consistency whatsoever. You need to buy a locker for Joker and Jersey Devil, even if you have zipper pockets. But you don't need a locker at all for Nitro or Superman Ultimate Flight. El Toro does have free double-sided lockers that they just installed, and they are doing the same for Jersey Devil at some point. But why implement the no-lose article policy before you have a plan figured out with lockers? I just don't understand how rides like Superman and Nitro don't require lockers, but Jersey Devil and Joker do. The consistency is so frustrating to deal with. Plus, this policy essentially makes Jersey Devil and Joker upcharge attractions. Come on, Six Flags, please fix this. There is literally no logic to what attractions require lockers and which don't. I was told Jersey Devil's lockers are going to be built at some point before next season, but I didn't hear anything about plans for Joker. I just hope they get it figured out. One last thing I'm going to put in the ugly category is how they used their new for 2024 coaster, Flash Vertical Velocity, in their advertising to sell season passes. But this coaster isn't even going to open this year. That just feels like lying to me. I suppose at the time they didn't really know that they wouldn't get the coaster open this year, but there's really no excuses for this coaster's construction being delayed by so much. I really do think it looks dishonest on the part of the park. Overall, Great Adventure is a park with a lot of potential. The lineup is very good, but basically everything else about this park ranges from mid at best to abysmal at worst. I hope they can get these issues sorted out to improve the guest experience for next year. If you agree or disagree with these thoughts, let us know in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.